העדר נוהר במבואות הכפר ועולה האבק משבילי עפר וההק עוצמת ענבלים מלווה את משך הצללים ערב בא, ערב בא.
And Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to what may be our last full month of online services, at least in this format. We are tentatively planning to return to in-person services beginning around the middle of July. We're still determining that date. We will keep you posted, of course, through our website, where you can always find our weekly email newsletter, and through all the other ways that we have to tell you, Facebook, etc. Be aware, too, that the weekend of the July 4th Independence Day holiday, we will not have services, not in person and not here on YouTube. But I do anticipate that within a week or two of that holiday, we may very well be returning. Of course, so much depends upon what's going on in the country. But let's keep a good thought. Welcome to Pride Shabbat. This is our second annual Pride Shabbat, where we'll focus on celebrating the LGBTQ community, of which yours truly, is a member, as was our founding Rabbi Wein. And tonight we'll hear from Dr. Tim Retzloff, an expert on Michigan's LGBTQ history, along with some stories, or at least one story, about Rabbi Wein's involvement behind the scenes in creating a broader human rights agenda here in Michigan. So, one last note, we are now offering some classes in person. Mainly, we have decided that my Monday Unrolling Judaism class, which resumes on Monday, June 14th, will be offered in person at the temple. This is for fully vaccinated people only. If you are unable to get a vaccine, you can call the temple and we'll see what we can do. But just so you know, we will remain on Zoom. We're going to try a hybrid approach. Saturday morning classes for now will remain on Zoom, and we'll keep you posted about Natan Fuchs's Jewish History Seminar, which is about to wind up for the summer in any case. We'll let you know what's going on with that. And we're very, very hopeful that by the high holidays, we will be in person fully. And we'll try as much as possible to keep as many things as we can online. It'll obviously be different than me sitting here in front of my faux bookshelves with this lovely graphic over my right shoulder. But in any case, we're really looking forward to ramping back up and getting back to some semblance of normal. So again, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Pride Shabbat. Let's continue now as we welcome Shabbat with light.
ברוך האור בעולם, ברוך האור באדם, ברוך האור בשלום, בשלום, ברוך האור, ברוך האור Shabbat.
A reading by Judy Silver, adapted. One day, the words coming out will sound strange. Oppression based on gender or orientation will be a memory, history to honor and remember. The pain of hiding, repressing, denying, honoring the triumphs of those who fought to be free, remembering the violence and vitriol that cost lives. When love wins at long last, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you will love your neighbor as yourself. and that will be as natural as breathing, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. One day love will win every heart, love will win every soul. Fear will vanish like smoke, and tenderness for all will fill our hearts. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love wins. In the end, love wins. Man for man, woman for woman, woman for man, man for woman, all genders, all orientations, all true expressions of heart. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Let this come speedily in our day, a tribute to the many and the diverse, a tribute to love deep and true, each of us for one another. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. Today, more than ever before, the humanistic Jewish community stands with those in the LGBTQ plus community, and we put a special emphasis on those LGBTQ people of color, so often threatened, doubly threatened, to ensure that they too shall be free from fear. Our humanistic philosophy insists that we all work together to end inequality, injustice, and violence. And our Jewish tradition has an echo of this from the past. The Talmud teaches all who can protest some wrong committed by their family and do not are accountable together with their family. All who can protest against some wrong committed by a citizen of their city and who do not are accountable together with all of the citizens of their city. And all who can protest some wrong committed by the whole world who do not are accountable together with all the citizens of the world. Let us honor the resilience, struggles, celebrations, and pride of the LGBTQ community. Let us take inspiration from them and others to fight for the lives of all of our fellow citizens. Let us do so through supporting each other, honoring love, respecting the dignity of every person, resisting tyranny, voting, and protesting. For all those who suffer oppression, let us stand for peace and for equality.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מהחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
My guest tonight is Professor Tim Retzloff, who teaches history and LGBTQ studies at Michigan State University. Dr. Retzloff earned his PhD from Yale University in 2014 and he's currently working on his very first book, Metro Gay, about gay and lesbian life and politics in Metro Detroit from 1945 to 1985. Dr. Retzloff is a very frequent guest on local radio and other media. He's been a guest on Stateside with Cindy Canty on Michigan radio, on the Craig Fail Show on WDET, and so many more. He's written about Michigan's queer past in anthologies, Creating a Place for Ourselves, in the journal GLQ, in the collection Making Suburbia, and frequently in the pages of our local LGBTQ newspaper, Between the Lines. Dr. Retzloff lives in Lansing with his husband, Rick, and last week he shared some of Michigan's history, some of what he's learned, something about the history of gay liberation, as it used to be called, including a little word about Rabbi Wine's behind-the-scenes activism. I hope you'll enjoy and be enlightened by this conversation that I shared with him. Dr. Retzloff, thank you so much for joining us tonight to celebrate Pride Shabbat. I want to get right into it and begin with a discussion, if you will, about the origins with the Mattachine Society, really the first gay rights organization that I'm aware of in America, of the struggle for LGBTQ rights in Michigan.
Yeah, so the Mattachine Society had been founded in Los Angeles in 1950, 51, and then over time there were chapters that were formed in cities across the country. And the Detroit chapter started in 1958 and lasted a good 17 months, so a good solid foundation. And it was a very cautious organization. There were three kind of principal men involved. All of them were graduates of Wayne State, Hal Lawson, David Brewer, and Jerry Moore, who went by Jay. In his bar life, he was Lady J. I want to Jay has been a really important person for me to talk to over the years as kind of the last surviving member of this group. He was Jewish, and so that was another aspect of his involvement. He was the first Jewish member of his fraternity at Wayne State, which is how he met Hal. They were deeply closeted as an organization. They were afraid to even get a post office box because someone had to sign their name. But they did produce a newsletter. They made some overtures. They had some meetings in public restaurants and that sort of thing. But I think they were just too fearful of kind of being found out. They were constantly worried about the police infiltrating, their meetings, and Detroit was a kind of bar-oriented city. Blue-collar bars were kind of the basis of, how what we would now put under the umbrella LGBTQ community. That was really the basis of life. Bars and then social networks and how people met privately.
So this was in the late 50s, and we know that nationally the real kickoff for gay rights in this country was a result of the late 60s and the events at Stonewall in New York. What were the repercussions here in Michigan and in Detroit?
Well, so there's debate among historians about how central Stonewall itself was, and it's been, because it's commemorated every June, its kind of impact to some eyes has been over exaggerated. But if you look at what was happening in Michigan in terms of organizations, it really lit a fuse. It was the spark that kind of started things off. So after Mattachine, there was another organization that was a chapter of a group called One, after One magazine, and it was founded in Grosse Pointe, and like Mattachine, it was discreet and careful, but a little more proactive, and I think the people involved were better at getting other people involved, and so that was kind of the organization that existed in 1968 and 69, and then it continued into the 70s. So that was generationally the old folks and kind of the old guard. What happened in Detroit, and then there were ripples in other parts of Michigan, is, you know, people caught wind of what was happening with Stonewall and the rise of gay liberation in New York and in San Francisco and LA. They were reading about it in, you know, the gay press, which was available. And the other important context is, you know, you have the student anti-war movement and the free speech movement. You have the civil rights movement kind of shifting into the Black Power movement. You have kind of the women's movement kind of becoming more radicalized and more, you know, more feminist in its orientation. And this rising militance also had kind of this impact. So you have a number of people in Detroit who decide to like start a gay group. And one of the individuals in particular placed an ad in the Fifth Estate, this underground newspaper in Detroit, and called a meeting. And so they started meeting in January 1970, and were drawing, you know, 50 and 60 and 70 people to a meeting. And one of the members, who was the secretary, was Jim Toy, who then went on to found the Ann Arbor Gay Liberation Front. Meanwhile, at Michigan State, a group of students there started a gay liberation movement group in April of 1970. So in the course of, you know, 6 months, you kind of have this explosion of activism going on. And Jim Toy, at an anti-war rally in Detroit in April 1970, became the first person to come out publicly as gay in Michigan. You know, he represented the Gay Liberation Front and spoke on behalf of the Gay Liberation Front against the war in Vietnam. And some of the organizers of the rally actually didn't want him to speak. So the shift from being, you know, very discreet to very public and militant and visible was striking. And they started a newspaper, the Gay Liberator newspaper, and they just started getting press that was not, you know, about who was arrested where, or condemnations in terms of mental illness, and just kind of really had an impact because it continued on. They also you know, were in your face and radical or revolutionary in kind of their outlook. Some of them, and some of them were not, and some chasms and splits emerged pretty quickly. But kind of the shining moment of kind of this gay liberation period in Michigan was that they had the first Pride March in Detroit in June of 1972. So there had been marches in Chicago and in San Francisco and in LA and in, of course, New York in 1970 and 71. But it's really in 1972 that other cities start picking up. And this was an effort that that had people from all over the state planning it and then attending it and taking part in it. And they celebrated, and you know, the surviving documents and accounts and press reports really reflected that there was this shining moment of diversity. So you've got you know, people who were, you know, there's a description of long hairs and short hairs, and masculine men and feminine men, and weak women and strong women, and then bisexuals and transsexuals, and cross-dressers and female impersonators and sex changes. I mean, some of the terms are clunky and antiquated, but they really celebrated the diversity. And it was also ethnically diverse. You know, there was the term was Chicano. They celebrated a Chicano person as one of the speakers. They had an African American speaker. Jim Toy has Chinese heritage. So there was kind of this moment of having this march and rally down Woodward, big rally in Kennedy Square, a dance that night at the Unitarian Church, and a picnic the next day in Palmer Park. And it was just a really big celebration. And every year since then, Metro Detroit has had some semblance of a Pride celebration ever since. So that's kind of
until
the
last
launching
June,
point, legacy.
when we had the
Right. But
pandemic.
they did, I mean, they tried to
Even
have a virtual one.
yeah,
So
even so, as we're doing tonight.
as we have all been doing.
So I grew up in Miami, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, and the Anita Bryant situation there with the which really represented a backlash to all of this pride, these public demonstrations, and really hurt me as a kid. I'll tell you, growing up in Miami. But to bring it to Detroit and Michigan, was there a ripple effect of that kind of reactionary response?
Well, there was a real feeling immediately of a threat, So, the gay lib kind of fervor waned around 73 or 74, but there were things that continued on. There was a radio program called Gaily Speaking. There was an organization that started in 75 called the Organization of Suburban People, which kind of became an outlet for political and social gathering for people who primarily lived in the suburbs. That shifted over time. But one of the people who I interviewed was Stuart Itzkowitz, and in his diary that night of that election, he just wrote, "Oh shit," he just was very aware that Anita was coming for us. And so people were aware and afraid of what could happen here. And Reverend Nancy Wilson, who was the pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit at the time, she called a meeting, and they formed a group called the Michigan Organization for Human Rights that was going to prepare against something like Anita Bryant happening. So this was started in 1977, and had representatives from around the state: Grand Rapids, Lansing, Ann Arbor. Madonna's dance instructor was one of the founding officers. And it lasted until the early 90s, and kind of and had multiple incarnations and achievements, but two of the things that I think are relevant today in how it continues on is it had a community center in the late 80s with a grant from the city of Detroit. And when the grant ran out, there were some people who wanted to continue on with the community center. So they kind of broke away and formed the basis of what became Affirmations. And then another kind of portion of the organization formed the basis of what became the Triangle Foundation, which is the precursor of Equality Michigan. So we've got kind of, the lasting legacy of the Michigan Organization for Human Rights are these two kind of principal institutions that still thrive and still serve our community.
So just a personal point, Stuart Itzkowitz was a friend of mine. He grew up with my husband, Arthur. But also we discussed the fact that Rabbi Wein, which may not have been known to many members of our congregation watching now, was involved in the Michigan Organization for Human Rights. Can you talk just briefly about that?
Yeah, so when they were just getting started, one of the founding officers was a man named Don Major, who had been active in gay liberation, and he was on the Gaily Speaking radio program, prolific writer. He realized, the danger, and he said, well, what I can do, because he was a hippie. He had been kind of radicalized. And he said, I can cut my hair, and then I can present myself and gain support. So he cut his hair, and one of the groups that he went to was a group of closeted discreet professional gay men in Metro Detroit, lawyers, doctors, professors, and Rabbi Wein was one of the key people involved in this organization. And Don Major talks about the support that Rabbi Wein provided, and attending one of the first meetings of this group that met once a month, called the First Sunday Group, um, and telling them about the organization and giving the pitch. And they collectively wrote enough checks to pay for a year's rent for office space for the new Moore organization.
Well, that's
So, he, however discreet he might have been in kind of his public life, and there were ways in which even as he was being discreet, he was, being publicly an ally, at least. Like in the gay Metro Gay News, he was in an article there. But this kind of behind the scenes, providing the pocketbook as support for this early organization is really a piece of the story that doesn't often get told. It was hush hush at the time, so we kind of understand why that's the case. But it's kind of crucial to kind of the survival of the organization. So.
Well, as the person who has the privilege of sitting in his office today and is most very definitely out and married to my husband Arthur, I have to tell you, it makes me very happy to know that Rabbi Wein was instrumental, at least in some parts, of what used to be called gay liberation in Michigan. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. This was extraordinarily educational for me, and I hope that our members enjoyed learning about it too. And I look forward to the opportunity to meet you in person someday when in person becomes a thing again. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much for having me.
Good night. Thank you. Once again, thank you to Dr. Retzlaff for enlightening us about this important history. We continue now with a poem, one that I love, by Judy Chicago, whose art and writing have meant so much to so many in so many different communities that seek liberation and freedom for all. She wrote, "And then all that has divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle, and then both women and men will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again." In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, and those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Joe Gaden, Julie Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight we observe the yahrzeits of David Ben-Ami, Rose Green, Helen Hornstein, Angela Jeffrey, Fanny Kaplan, Ida Krohn, Zini Lakowitz, Jacob Lichtman, Leslie Lipson, Gussie Meyerson, Morton Moltz, Ellen Shainlunker, Louis Shainlunker, Idel Unger, Gerald Wolberg, and Sadie Wolberg. Yehi Zichram Livracha, may memories of these beloved people bring some measure of comfort to those who face life in their absence. Well, that's our Pride Shabbat. Next year, I look forward to being together in person as we celebrate, but we can and will be together in person very soon for classes, hopefully in July, for in-person services, and so much more as we finally have begun to turn the corner on this horrible pandemic. Let's keep it going. Let's get our friends vaccinated. All right, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We'll conclude with this beautiful song about love and joy and peace.
Peace be with you.